So first of all, I want to really thank Avigadasman, not just for making sure this happened. Such a Talmud Chacham, every topic I spoke about, he already gave me the Mar Makaimis himself. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's an incredible thing. So we're talking about a shaila, which is, this question comes up. I was by a meeting for Lakewood Hatzalah 2 nights ago, where this same question came up with the leaders of Hatzalah to decide how to address it, how to create certain policies. So the shaila which we're talking about today is, we know that there are various ways to make a malacha d'iraisa or a malacha d'rabbanan, to make it more lenient. You can do an aמירה לעכו, you can do a שינוי, שתיים שעשו. There's a lot of different ways. But one of the questions is how do we look at it as far as what is better? Do I do aמירה לעכו or do I do a שינוי? So for example, one of the practical questions which are coming up for us is, let's say we have a Hatzalah member has a patient, and we want to get this patient to the hospital. We want to get it to a doctor to decide what the procedure should be. Now we have a choice. We could either send the patient with a guy, do aמירה לעכו, or there's a way through a שינוי, we could do a malacha by sending a picture to the doctor, and he'll be able to tell us what to do. There's a lot of details that involved. How does the doctor respond? Is there a guy available? But essentially the question is, what is better? To do a שינוי, or do a yid, to do a malacha with a שינוי, or to do a malacha via aמירה לעכו and a guy?
Rotberg, I sent you a message on the chat if you don't mind taking a look at it. Okay.
I got it. If we really think of to really respond to this question, we have to first understand, what is the isser of aמירה לעכו? Why is it asr to do aמירה לעכו? There's a big debate amongst the Rishonim what the isser of aמירה לעכו is. So there's the Beis Yosef, a famous shita that brings down, which is a Das Yechidah from the Smag, that learns that aמירה לעכו, telling a guy to do something for a yid, is an isser min haTorah. He brings from the Mechilta and Parshas Boy that says, Kol malacha le'yasa b'hem. So it says, Loisasa atav le'yasa chavercha v'le'yasa hagoy melachtecha. It's mashma that the isser of aמירה לעכו is maybe an isser min haTorah. Now it's very shver. We know the Gemara in Shabbos and Kufnon and the Gemara in Eruvin Daf Samaches says specifically that aמירה לעכו is a shvus, is a malacha d'rabbanan. And the Pri Megadim tries to explain, it really depends if the guy is doing a malacha with your object, with the chayvet shel Yisrael, the chayvet shel Akum, different explanations. But most agree, almost everyone agrees, that aמירה לעכו is not an isser d'iraisa. So what is the isser aמירה לעכו? And in order to understand the difference between aמירה לעכו and shinui, we need to understand the genesis of the isser and why something is asr. So Rashi is a very famous Rashi in Avodah Zarah Daf Tezayin. It says the isser of aמירה לעכו comes from the source of the isser of the daber davar, that you're not allowed to talk divrei chol. We learn out from the pasuk Mimtzei chefzecha v'daber davar. We learn out from there that a person is not allowed to talk about the mundane things which are on Shabbos. So therefore, telling a guy to do a malacha is the isser v'daber davar. Another reason Rashi gives is the isser of shlichus. You're not allowed to make a shliach, even though we say ein shliach ledvar avera. So what do you mean? How could a guy be my shliach? But l'chumra we say shlichus. That was the 2 reasons. So let's get this clearly. Rashi brings, that's 3 reasons so far. Number 1, aמירה לעכו zaser, it's an isser min haTorah. We learn now from the pasuk that is a das yechidah. The Pri Megadim already points out that all the Acharim point out that it's very hard to understand that. The Gemara says it's isser d'rabbanan. Rashi brings 2 yisurim. Either v'daber davar, you learn out Mimtzei chefzecha v'daber davar, you can't talk about divrei chol, or because of the reason of shlichus, as he says in Daf Kufnon Gimel, atzat shlichus. Now, why do I need this isser? And so too, by the way, Reb Kveger in Shulchan Aruch Shin Zayin, as well as Agois Maimnis in Shabbos, in Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Zayin Halacha Beis, also says that it's an isser aמירה לעכו is an isser of shlichus, because l'chumra we say yesh shlichus advar vera. Why is it so important? These two reasons. Very simple. Because Amir La'akum, the issa to tell a guy to do a malacha is not just said by Shabbos, it's also said by other Yisurim. So if you say that the issa is v'da b'davar to talk divrei chol, then how could that be also when it comes to other Yisurim? To talk about cutting down a tree, to have a shlichus akum is aser. There must be these two reasons. Number one is an issa which is dedicated to Shabbos of mimtzechevzcha v'da b'davar. Number two is shlichus. The Rambam in Perek Zayin Hilchos Shabbos Halacha Aleph says the issa to tell a guy to do a malacha is almost like a gzeira. It should be you can't shaloitei Shabbos kala beinein v'yavoyu lasei spatzman. It's much more of an gzeira type of thing. So there's different reasons of what. So the different reasons of Amir La'akum on Shabbos, either this is the Raisa we learned out from the pasuk, which as we says that that's Yechidah. Either it's talking about V'da b'davar, Mimtzei Chevzcha V'da b'davar, that's why it's aser, or shlichus, or the fourth reason so far is like the Rambam, it's a gzeira. Now the Ran and other Rishonim say there's a different isser. There's an isser that you cannot have your malacha happen via somebody else. So one of the Yisurim on Shabbos is not just that you can't do a malacha, you can't have someone do the malacha for you either. That is reason number 5. Now, why is a shinui? How does a shinui work? So we know it's not very clear what the genesis of the heter of shinui is. Why? It's understood that we learn out from the pasuk by the Kamas HaMishkan Lasis B'chol Meleches Machsheves, and all the melachas of Shabbos has to be done where it's done in the Mishkan. So since a person is doing a malacha with a shinui, that is not the derech asiyah, the way we usually do a malacha. So therefore we say therefore it's no malacha. Chazal made a gzeira and said that no, that it's still aser on Shabbos because they made a gzeira that otherwise we could be over on all Isurei Shabbos. So Amir La'akum is aser for 5 different reasons. Shinoi is aser, is gzeira midrabanan. Really, it's just not a malacha, so it'd be mutter, because you're not doing derech hasiyah. So now let's go to some of the sources we brought. And the first source is the Gemara in Ksubis Daf Samach. And the Gemara over there talks about someone who's a chayla she'ein by sakana, as Tosfos proves. It's talking about a chayla she'ein by sakana. Now, for a chayla she'ein by sakana, someone who's bedridden, somebody who's in a lot of pain, you're not allowed to do a malacha d'oraisa. The truth is, you're not even allowed to do a malacha d'rabanan for a chayla she'ein by sakana. You're only allowed to do a shvus to shvus, a double d'rabanan. Now, it's understood that milking a cow is a d'oraisa. There's a big discussion about this, a big machlokes about it. But for the sake of this conversation, it seems that they bring rayos from the different rishonim that's an issa d'oraisa. So now you have a chayla she'ein by sakana. A chayla she'ein by sakana. Why are you allowed to go be goynach? Why are you allowed to go to go milk from a cow? It's aser. It might be an issa d'oraisa. The Gemara says that he did a kalachayad. Ubemakim tsar lo gozer rabbanon. B'makim tsar, it's not aser. The special heter to do it b'makim tsar, a yid is allowed to do a malacha with a shinui. So now the Rishonim already handle over there that why is the yid doing the malacha? Why is he being goynech yoinek? Why don't you get a guy to do the malacha? Why a yid? Well, get a guy. And this question is asked by the Ran, and this is a very, very famous discussion in the Ran, which the Ran says that it's obviously talking about it's impossible to do it al yidei akum. So therefore, medically speaking, he's required to drink the milk directly from the cow, and therefore in this case we allow him to do it. So it comes out according to this that really it would be aser. Better to do with a guy. The Ran is saying, why don't I use a guy? The answer is, I can't use a guy. So it comes out, if I have a choice, should a yid do a malacha with a shinui, or should I get a guy to do the malacha? The teretz is, it's better to get a guy. In this case, it happens to be, I can't use a guy. That would seem to be the logic of the Ran. However, the Ran, in the 2 paragraphs later, talks about the Gemara of Tzina Sha'alu by Kashkashin. Person has a gutter, a pipe, and it's full of leaves. Now it's an Isser to remove it. Is it Isser D'Rabbanan? Is it Isser D'Oraisa? A little bit of, also a big Shaila. And the Ran has the following question. He says, if you tell me that because the person's going to lose his money, it's going to flood his house, therefore he's allowed to, with a shinoi, he's allowed to do a malacha d'Rabbanan kalachayad with a shinoi, because we say that, but Malkim say that where it's a question of losing a lot of money, when there's a huge monetary loss, we allow a yid to do a malacha b'shinoi. The Ran wants to know, if that's the case, how come the Gemara in Shabbos it says that if a guy comes, his son has a fire, his house is burning down, you're not allowed to tell the guy to extinguish the fire. Why not? Because why not? It doesn't make any sense. It's a malacha d'Rabbanan to save a person's money. The guy's going to save his whole home before there's fire insurance. He had nothing left. Why don't we matir that? So the Ran comes and gives 2 different reasons. Reason number 1 he wants to say is that over there, the only reason why it's a malacha d'Rabbanan to put out a fire is because it's a malacha she'en tzricha legufa. Meaning, in the Beis HaMikdash, the reason why they put out fires were because they needed coal. They needed pchamim. However, when a person puts out a fire in his home, it's not because he needs the burnt object. The reason why he puts out the fire is because he doesn't want it to burn down his house, which is considered a malacha she'en tzricha legufa. I'm not doing the malacha of putting out a fire for the reason they did so in the Mishkan, which is a malacha d'Rabbanan. However, says the Ran, I could easily turn that into a malacha d'Oraisa. If I'm not careful, what's called tzricha legufa, what's not, in other words, what I'm doing with the intended reason, which was done in the Mishkan, it could quickly become a d'Oraisa. So therefore, it's aser. The second reason is what we're going to focus on now. Inami shani hachi shu shvus kalachayad. He says that doing, clearing out the drain with a person's foot, with a person's leg, he says that's considered doing a malacha d'Rabbanan with a shinoi. The chomer tvei shvus de Shabbos hanasa kedarkoi dahainu ayidei nachri, and it's more stringent to tell a guy to do a malacha versus doing it yourself with a shinoi. Here comes a big kasha. The Tila David and many Achronim point out, and there's a similar steer in the Magen Avram as well. How is this possible? How could you tell me that the reason why a yid is allowed to clear out the drain with his foot is over there? It's more kuladik, because that's the yid doing a malacha with a shinoi, which is more kuladik than telling a guy. Wait a second. By goynach, we said, really it's better to do it with a guy. It's just over there you can't do it with a guy because of technical reasons. But otherwise we would do it with a guy. There's a pashta stira. What is better to do, with a guy or with a yid to do it with a shinoi? Now, first of all, let's understand b'chlal. What would be the havamina? That it's better for a yid to do a maisa. So a yid is have a choice here. I can either tell a guy to turn on the light, or I could turn on the light with a shinoi. Why in the world would it be better for me to do it with a shinoi versus telling a guy? So one of the slaras is that it's possible to argue that a shinoi, that a malacha which is done in a different manner, in an abnormal manner, essentially, it's as if I did not do that action at all. I did not do that action. The malacha of turning on a light, of mavir or boina, I didn't do it. Malacha of mavir is to turn on a light. When I do it in an awkward way, it's a chesaron in the etzem hamalacha. There's the actual way that this malacha was done. I did not. There's something missing in the way it was done. I did it in an abnormal way. However, the malacha of telling a guy to do something that I did in a normal way. I just told the guy to do it. So this malacha of turning on a light is called a malacha gerua. When you do it with a shinoi, it's not a purebred malacha. It's something. It's a malacha gerua, and therefore it'd be better to do with a shinoi. That seems to be what the logic would be in this. Rav Vosna in our Chaim Chedekei Siman Lamed Ches says a fascinating thing which is so important in trying to explain the difference between the two. Rav Vosna explains that there's a big difference between a Malacha D'Rabbanan, which is a Shvus, which Chazal created an Isser to do this activity. The Torah said it's not Isser, but Chazal said that's called an Isser Shvus. There's other times where Chazal didn't say that this is an Isser action, but because of the Gzeira, Chazal said you're not allowed to do it. Meaning, they didn't define this as a forbidden action inherently. All they did was they created a Gzeira. They said, listen, if you're going to do this, you may come to do that. So therefore, as a precaution, they said you shouldn't do that action. So that's a different, and based on the Vilna Gaon in the end of Sin and Shin Mem Tes, he wants to say that the Malacha, when Chazal designated an action as a forbidden action, which is called a Shvus, that is more stringent than where Chazal said that something is Asr, not because inherently it's Asr, but it's Asr because we're afraid if you do that, it'll come to something else. It means it's not inherently forbidden, it's only forbidden because of the fear of the next step. Therefore, he wants to suggest that Amir La'akum is an Isser Shvus, especially according to Rashi. That's because of the Davar Davar, Mimtzei Chetzecha. According to Shlichos, Chazal said that this is an Isser Shvus. It's a forbidden action to tell a guy to do something. Shinui inherently is mutter. But Chazal said we're afraid if you start doing everything with a Shinui, Shabbos is going to be gone. Or you'll do it kedarkai. So therefore, it's a gezerah. So he says, because Shvus is more stringent than gezerah, therefore, to do something with a shinoi is more lenient, because that is a gezerah. It's more lenient, it's more permissible to do something with a shinoi than Amir La'akum, because Amir La'akum is inherently a forbidden action as a Shvus. This is what he wants to suggest in general to understand the difference between shinoi and Amir La'akum, and a fascinating chilik al pi the Gra, the difference between Shvus and Gezerah. Now, it doesn't really help us in the Ran to understand the stira. Now, a suggestion he gives over there, I don't remember if he gave it or it's spoken about a lot, is that it's possible. So now we have a stira. The Ran in one place is saying that it's use a guy. A choyle, someone who's sick, use a guy. However, if you're having financial loss, no, better do it with a shinui. What's the difference? So those that want to suggest that it's possible that b'makom choyle, that when we're talking about, why don't you tell the guy to do the malacha with a shinui if possible? Great shaila, we're going to get to that. So here's a fascinating shaila. So if you have, so those that want to suggest that Amir La'akum b'makom, where I have a sick person, if someone who's lying in bed, he has a case of a choyle shem b'sakana, someone who has a terrible toothache, he's screaming in pain. You want to go tell the guy to go to bring him to a dentist, a goyish dentist, to give him a shot to stop the pain. Is that something which is us? It's betzim aser, but we're matirit b'shas atchak. There's those that want to say no, that b'makom choyle lo gazru. It's 100% mutar lechatchila for a guy to do a malacha for a yid, Amir La'akum lo gazru b'makom choyle, and therefore, by the case of goynach, we're talking about a sick person, we'll tell the person, you know what? Listen, you're a choyle. Go tell the guy to do it. For a guy, it's 100% mutter. However, when it comes to financial loss, that concept is not there, that it's 100% mutter. No. It could be we're matirit, but it's not hutra. It's not like gazru, even though it does say similar lashon of like gazru. But so therefore, over there, it's better to use a shinui because the akum is not 100% mutter. This is, I heard many people say such svaris. The problem with this is, when you go through Hilchos Shabbos, there's a very, very interesting shayla which comes up. Let's say let's say there's a chol l'shem b'sakana. Someone has a very, very bad headache. So I really could wait till after Shabbos to take medicine. I could wait till after Shabbos to take the person to the dentist. Am I mechuyev to wait till after Shabbos or not? So the Mogen Avram says, in Shinchav Ches Sivkat Yud Aleph, he says that you're only mutter to do, have a guy do a malach for you on Shabbos, only if it's going to be done on Shabbos. It's only mutter if it's needed on Shabbos itself. In the Megillah Sefer, he says that no, there's no such thing. Really, for a chol l'shem b'sakana, it's mutter to do anything on Shabbos. You don't have to wait until after Shabbos. He brings from the Chai Adam, for example, the Moshe brings it down, Sivkat Nun Aleph, that you're allowed to do a malacha Aidei Yisrael for a chol l'shem b'sakana. A yid, if someone needs a shot, he's in terrible pain. A yid could give the shot with a shinoi, which is a double derabanan, a shvus to shvus, an intramuscular shot, a subcutaneous shot, not an IV line, it's a malacha derabanan, and do it with a shinoi. A yid would be able to do it 100%, even if he's able to get a guy. Even if you can get a guy. Dr. Shem Zalman, you know why? He says what you're allowed to, when we're matter to do for a chol l'shem by sakana, is because loy gazru klal. Loy gazru klal. That means by chol l'shem by sakana, it doesn't mean because loy gazru. There is no gzer when it comes to a sick person. That makes it okay. It's very geschmack. So maybe that's why by goynach, it makes sense why the Ran says, go get a guy. Because there's no by chol l'shem by sakana, there's no isser b'chlal of using a guy. The problem is that the same allowance to do any malacha on Shabbos for a chol l'shem by sakana, for someone who's in pain, it's also extended to somebody who needs to do a malacha. It's also extended to a yid himself doing a malacha. The Mishabura says, it's talking about someone who's a chol l'shem by sakana. The Mechaber says on that you do it with a shinoi. You do a malacha d'rabbanan with a shinoi. The Mishabura in Sivkan Nun Dal says, Hainu ha'isa d'rabbanan. If you have a chol l'shem by sakana, a yid could do a malacha d'rabbanan. Ve'ein tzarech lachapis acher eni Yehudi. You don't have to look for a guy. So it's mashma, first of all, that Amir la'akim really would be better. But in other words, that b'makom chayla, there's no gzeir b'chlal. So if there's no gzeir b'chlal, then we back to the question, what is going on here? Why is it that when it comes to a chayla, we say better use a guy? When it comes to the case of the tziner, we say a shinui is better. Mamash astira, and you can't tell me because b'makom chayla we weren't geyser on Amir la'akim, so therefore use a guy because we weren't geyser either a shvus. We don't say better not to do a shvus. A yid shouldn't do a derabanan. Wait till after Shabbos. We say no problem. It's mutter. So they're both equal. So why do you go with the guy? This question is really it's a very, very difficult shaila to shaila. And I spoke to Rabbi Gottesman about this topic. He actually referred off the cuff, told me that brought up this marmakim, and someone just asked in the following question as well. The question goes as follows. There's a big debate whether or not somebody who needs to do a malacha, this question comes up, legabe, a woman who needs to cut her nails for the tefillah, and it's discussed over there, if a woman that forgot to cut her nails, and she needs to go to be toivel, the Mogen Avram, and Simon Shin Mem says that she's allowed to tell a guy to cut her nails l'tzarech mitzvahs tefillah. He says, and really the guy should do it with a shinoi. But if he can't do it with a shinoi, then he could do it even with a nail clipper or kli. Why? He says, because really in the cutting of nails, fine. So he comes up with a heter. This started a tremendous debate amongst many poskim. We know that in certain that you're not allowed to do a malacha dairai. A guy is not allowed to do. You're not allowed to have a guy doing malacha dairaisa for a yid, except for mamish, there's a shitas bala eater, extreme cases, you can have a guy can do a malacha d'oraisa. Otherwise, a guy can't do a malacha d'oraisa. He has to do only a malacha d'rabbanan. So the question is very simple. Why don't we tell a guy to do a malacha with a shinui, and then I'm good? The guy's going to do a malacha with a shinui, so then he's doing a malacha d'rabbanan, is a shvus to shvus, and it's no problem. Every single time I have an issue. Somebody didn't put his fire on, he has cooked food. It's not an issue of, food, it's a different issue. Someone didn't put on his lights. As incandescent light bulbs, a malacha d'oraisa. He said, you know, I'll ask a guy can't do a d'oraisa. Very simple. Tell the guy to do it with a shinui. So there's a big debate about whether or not, whether a guy doing something with a shinui makes it a shvus to shvus. So that conversation is far larger than this discussion. Now, not everyone's very excited about it. I saw from Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal, he says a very interesting thing. Rabbi Yashiv says that if for a guy just to go do a malacha with a shinui, for a guy to turn on the light with a switch with his elbow, that doesn't make it a shvus to shvus. Rabbi Yashiv wants to suggest there's a fascinating shaila in shinui in general. We all do shinuyim. You know, people are not solid, people that need to. You do a shinui. What's a shinui? They take an elbow, they turn something on. And Moshe is not very excited about a lot of these shinuyim. He says, it's the same, you did the same thing. You turned the switch. You use your elbow or your finger, what's the chilik? There's certain shinuyim which are bigger shinuyim than others. So, a shinui is just the way I did it. Instead of my elbow, instead of my finger, I used an elbow. But then there's a certain shinui which changes the echos. Knows the outcome of the melacha is changed versus the shinui. So, for example, let's say I do something which the outcome is not the same. That's a real shinui. Now, the Iglei Tal says that you're not required to do such a shinui. Even if there's no change in the outcome, it's also a shinui. But Rabbi Yashiv says that if you want a guy to do a malacha for you on Shabbos, it should be a shvus to shvus, he's got to do a big shinui. It's got to be a shinui be'echos, and then it's a shvus to shvus. Why? Every malacha, every time we do a shinui, we don't pass like that. The Iglei Tal says clearly, even if there's no change in the outcome, it's still a shinui. So why is that? So I wanted to suggest, according to the Ran, Lishitase, the Ran holds the Isser of Amir La'akum is simply, you have an Isser to do whatever it is. You're not allowed to milk a cow. The same way you can't milk a cow, you're not allowed to instruct that someone else do it on your behalf. That's an Isser of Amir La'akum, is someone can't do something on your behalf. So, who said that doing something on your behalf makes a difference if I use a shinui or not? Let's say I did use a shinui. What's the difference? Still, somebody did a malacha on my behalf. If somebody did a malacha on my behalf, it's asa. So says Reb Shlomo, says Rabbi Yashiv, that depends. If there's a shinui in the outcome, in the echos, then that's a big difference. So, right. So one of the shinuyim, which would be a shinui in the echos, right, would be writing where it's going to be a different outcome. Or one of the examples they give is goynach. They explain that really for a chayla she'ein by sakana, someone's in pain, you're not allowed to do a deraisa with a shinui, according to many achrayim. You have to do a shvus to shvus. So why are you allowed to go milk the cow with your mouth? It's only one shinui. It's only a shvus. So they explained that the shinui of milking a cow, because you can't have the same outcome, there's a difference in the teitzah, that's a shinui gadol. And therefore we're matir in that specific case. But you can't extrapolate from that to all cases. So now we can understand, maybe we have a teretz in the Ran. The Ran wants to know goynach. Goynach is a case, which is the case of goynach. He says, why don't we use a guy? Why? So now, why? Well, I should use a guy. Why? Because if a guy does it, right? So if a guy's going to do a deraisa with a shinui, so it means he's going to do it's a derabanan. Better ask a guy. Yeah, it's very simple. What we discussed. Amira, when I'm doing an action, when I'm not. However, when it came to the case of tziner, that I want to be, that I have a pipe and it's flooded, and I have a pipe which is flooded and I want to go clean it out with my foot, that's not a shinui in the echos. It's going to clean out, it's all the same. The outcome's the same. So over there, it could be if a guy does it with a shinui, it's not a shvus to shvus. It's only amir lakum. As Rabbi Yashiv said, the only time you have a shvus to shvus by a guy is if there's a shinui in the outcome, the shinui with the echos hadavar. So it could be that Iran seems to hold that the whole isser of clearing out the drain is only a malacha d'Rabbanan. As Rav Vosner points out, he says shvus kalachayat. So here I have a choice. Either I could have a yid do a shvus to shvus of cleaning it out, or I could have a choice of letting or the guy doing it, which is a regular d'Rabbanan, let the guy do it, it's a shvus to shvus. Let the yid do it, it's a shvus to shvus. The guy wouldn't be a shvus to shvus. Moshe ain't came by goynach. In that case, I have the yid could do a shinoi gadol, which okay, but it's a shinoi, it's a d'Rabbanan. Or I could tell a guy to do it. So over there, it's better to tell a guy to do it, because over there, the guy would over there it's all being equal. The guy can't do, because in that case we're both doing a d'Rabbanan. That would be, but it's not so clear either. It's not so clear either, because over there also might be a shvus to shvus. There are those that ask, why can't the guy do it with a shinoi? They say that's disgusting. You can't ask a guy to do it with a shinoi. But it's possible. Over there is different. Because if the guy over there does it with a shinoi, as Rav Vosner writes, that you can ask the guy to do it with a shinoi. Over there, that would be a real shinoi and would be a shvus to shvus. Over there, if I get the guy to do it with a shinoi, it's possible. Over there would be a double d'Rabbanan, because over there there's an outcome in the echos. There's an outcome in the echos, like we said. Goynach is different. The output is different. So over there would be a real case of shvus to shvus, and therefore we'd say better ask a guy. However, by this other case, because there's no shinoi in the etzem echos hadavar, so therefore we wouldn't necessarily tell the guy to, better let the yid do it, better than telling the guy, because if the guy is going to do it, it's only going to be one d'Rabbanan. So that's the question. So that,
can I ask the Rav, if you don't mind, to explain Rabbi Yashiv Siur, this lumdis of a shinui be'echus? What example does he use, just to clarify for the olam what a shinui be'echus means?
Okay, so Rabbi Yashiv does not. What Rabbi Yashiv explains is, he says that somebody cuts nails with his finger, or someone writes with his left hand. Over there, the outcome is going to be different than if somebody turns on his light with an elbow. A shinui in the echos means that the output from the action I did is going to be different than if I would have done it in an ordinary fashion. So the difference between biting your nail versus using a nail clipper, the output is different. You see anybody that bites his nails. You see someone who cuts his nails. It's different. Goynach. If I milk a cow with my mouth, I'm going to get it. The output is going to be a lot less than someone who does it the typical way with his hand. So in that case, if a guy would use a shinui, so over there, that would be a good shvus to shvus. However, if I have to clean out a pipe, I can either use my hand to clean it out, or I can use my foot to clean it out. It's possible that wouldn't be a shinui in the echos, that there's no difference in the outcome. So over there, you wouldn't have the mila of shvus to shvus. So therefore, it's better for a yid to do it in that way. That is what Efsher you could say as an explanation for the stira in the Ran.
Is that solid makbid to tell the guy to do anything with a shinui?
So with Hatzalah, we generally use Hatzalah members for two things. We use Hatzalah members is number one to drive members' homes. It's not really negeya a shinui. And we use them for chayla she'im by sakana, where there's no halacha for them, because over there you're allowed to do, there's nothing to do with a shinui. When sometimes once the guy is there and they want the guy to do a malacha, so then that's the only time it comes relevant, which is really not that Hatzalah's issue. So we never really dealt with it, never told him to do anything with a shinui. there's a story that in Lakewood Yeshiva, they came in, and when Rabban was a Shiva, they came in and the lights were off. The big Talmud Chacham he said, the Bala Eater. He said, he said, he went to go get a guy to turn on the light. Baron said, how did he turn on the light? So he said, I got a guy. He said, no, tell him to come back. He should shut the light, because he did remiza to shut a light, which is muta, and turn it back on with the shinui. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if you could, I don't know what you could learn from a Maisa, but that's definitely a question. So one of the questions I saw somebody popped up about prescription pad, because this comes out for the people that still write prescriptions. Let me see if I can get that question back up. What about writing a prescription? So this is the classic question. So here's the classic question. So this is what I wanted to get to. So where this comes to gay is for doctors. And I could either ask a guy to write it, which is Amirah La'akum, or I could write it myself with a shinui. Now the truth is that, and then this is one of the cases, if you told the guy to do it with a shinui, that would be the best. Because then it's taka shus to shus. So over there, everybody would agree possibly it's better tell the guy to do it with a shinui. That would be one of the examples where it might be kedai. But if let's say the guy can't write to the shinui, nothing's going to be legible, what is it better to do? So essentially, again, it's because what is classified as a shinui and what's not is sometimes there's some ambiguity, and most achronim disagree with the Ran and say it's better to do Amir La'akim, which is a shlos shaloya yidei maisa, and doing it with a shinui. Some practicalities, probably, if the guy can't do it with a shinui, it's probably anyways better to tell the guy to do it kedarkai, better than doing it in a way which you didn't really do the shinui and things like that, especially since many poskim hold that a Amir La'akum, it's a shvus shein b'maisa, which is therefore better, and therefore they disagree with the whole premise of the Ran. But that's exactly where this would come, and a ge'edika halacha l'maisa, between all this lumdus would really be a true difference in halacha. Abba, am I out of time? I don't remember.
No.
Okay. So now, here comes a fascinating. It's mom. So here it's coming out. Prescription out electronically often. So so being that prescriptions are primarily done, I believe narcotics can be done electronically. Am I right about that? But I think for the most part, prescriptions are sent in electronically. So then you're talking about
all prescriptions are sent in electronically, including narcotics, especially narcotics.
Oh, everything's done electronically?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So it's definitely better to use a malacha to do a malacha d'Rabbanan, assuming that using a computer is a malacha d'Rabbanan with a shinoi, a shvus to shvus. That for sure would be something mutter, where this is where we spoke about earlier, that according to the Mishnah Berurah, I don't have to go look for a guy. I don't have to look around the neighborhood to find a guy to do it, because like the Mishnah Berurah quoted, and Shem Zalman explains, for sure. But even I'm not required to go look for a way to find a head to dig away. You have a head to dig away. A shvus to shvus would be allowed, and therefore you'd be allowed to do it according to that. So that would be as far as is doing malachas on Shabbos. So it comes out according to this. According to the Ran, it's better to do a shinoi ayidei Yisrael, shvus to shvus Yisrael, versus telling a guy. If we're right, it's only specific cases based on Rabbi Yash's understanding, or maybe not. But this is the debate. Now let's fast forward to Siman Shin Chav Ches. So here becomes one of the biggest debates, which every single Hatzalah that have Erlich Yidin, they have to start having this question. I gave a share last night for some newer Hatzalah members, and this is right. We started this shiloh. This is the first shiloh we discussed. So the Machaber Paskins, when you have a Chodesh Yesh B'Sakana, you don't look for goyim. Meaning, if you have come to the emergency room and there's a guy there who's a doctor, you use the best doctor. But that means is we don't give up our responsibilities and put it on a guy. Say, oh, I'm not doing it. You got to ask the guy. You don't look for a guy. You don't look for a minor. You don't say, oh, let this woman do it. You used gedolim b'nei das. That means you do it. Al de gedolim Yisrael, the Rambam, with all we're not. So this is a very famous thing based on the Gemara in Yuma Daf Dalet. Now the Ramos says v'yeshayim. If let's say you have a case, and this is where the classic case is. I think where it comes up for Atzala members. You come to a call, and the patient has abdominal pain. Now, let's not take abdominal pain. It's a patient, the elderly patient is just not feeling so well. Now they're not sure. They want to know, should they, no one's alarmed, vitals are fine, everything's fine, but he's just feeling a little weak. And they decide, you know what, we're not taking a risk, we want to take him to the hospital. Now, someone told me this question. Now, we call the doctor, and the doctor says, you know, I'm in shul, or whatever the case is. You know, or someone says, I'm not going to half out, 20 minutes, we'll be home, call in 20 minutes. Now, the members are perfectly fine waiting 20 minutes. Paramedics are there. Everything's stable. Better talk to the doctor. They make a mistake. It's no matziv bahal. There's no one is concerned. No one is terrified. Someone whose feeding tube came out, just had a feeding. There's no tremendous risk. It's not a matziv bahal. It's not a panic situation. Just has to get to the hospital. In that case, do I use a guy anyways, because it is classified as a yesh by sakana, or no? Why should I use a guy if I could do it beheter? Are you doing a shinui or doing it with a guy? So the Ramah says that if it's not going to cause delay, it's not going to cause subpar treatment, it's not going to cause anything negative, use a guy, use a shinui. Don't do it yourself. The Machaber says no, you do it with a yid. So classically, we paskin like the Ramah. And this is based on there's a conversation with Dar Zeru and the Rav Yah and the Ramban. I don't want to get into the details of it. I want to try to stick to some of the practicality of this. So typically we paskin like the Ramah, which would suggest that we really should be using a goy or a shinui whenever possible. Now, comes along the Taz, and the Taz turns this all upside down. The Taz says no. Rishonim, the Ran, the Ramban explain, why don't we use a guy? Not because we're worried necessarily. Well, part number one is because because if we believe that a yid, a designated person, God will be Yisrael, he'll be more effective. He'll be more aggressive. He's not going to procrastinate. The difference between the response maybe from a typical 911 call versus a Hatzalah call, go with the yid, they're just going to be more aggressive. They're more invested, involved. So that's a better care. But the second reason is a michshol shemed la'asad lavi. It means like this. If let's say every Shabbos there's a chayla, and we say, you know what? Let's not use let's use the guy. We have a guy anyways. It comes Shabbos number 18, and there's a chayla sheish, but somebody having severe chest pains, and the guy is a holiday, he's not around. They're going to say, 1 second, you can't drive. What do you mean drive? The minhag in Lakewood is we get a guy. The guy drives. And the guy's going to say, no, but it's a chayla. You want to be mekel? I don't know if you could be mekel. Shama yaveh davil de michshol. It could be a terrible, terrible thing, which could eventually lead to that. It could lead to a sakonas nefashos. So therefore, we say, do not do it with a guy. Do not do it with anyone. Don't try to pass on the responsibility to anyone else. Do it yourself, a Gedol Yisrael, in the most expeditious manner, and that's it. So this is the Shitas Hataz. And now what's interesting is, if you look through the Taz, so, and this is really interesting. So it comes out, again, that if you have a yid or a guy, the Taz says, don't worry, just use the yid. Now that's all talking about the all these svaras that Yisrael is rizihein and all these types of things is really referring to a akum, to using a goy versus a yid. There's a very big question of whether or not that would apply to using a shinoi as well. So let's say you have a yid that is on a call. And now the question is, he needs to turn on the light. Now it's not a panic situation. He goes to the back of the ambulance and he has to turn on the air conditioning. So do we say the same way we don't use a goy, we don't use a shinui? Or no, we use a shinui. I was doing EKG lead, not a panic situation. That's protocol, he needs to do it. Should he smear it on with a shinui or just do a kedarkai? So using a goy, we say that it's possible that you're gonna end up coming to rely on the goy. Do you have that same svara by a shinui or not? Or not? By a shinui, we say the yid is doing it. He's not giving the responsibility to someone else. It could come such a icha v'dichui. I'm going to come to. If I do it the back of my hand. Again, we're not talking about a matziv bowl. We're not talking about a panic situation, a non-panic situation. What's the big deal? Let me do it with a shinui. So do we say that or not? This is the question, and this is a tremendous. When I started learning Hilchos Shabbos, this was the first shayla I came across that I couldn't really find much. I had a very, very interesting shayla about this. I spoke to one of the Talmidim of Rabbi Yashiv, and I asked him this question. I said, if you look in the Taz really talks about using a goy, but he doesn't say anything about using a shinui. By a shinui, maybe you don't have that sorry. You could use a shinui. So I called this one of the Talmidim. I don't want to use any names. A Talmud Muvuk of Rabbi Yashiv. I called him back 2 days later. He says he met the Rav, and the Rav's a maskim. Maskim, he smiled. He said he's maskim. I meet the Yid in Lakewood. I was working on a sefer and emergencies and Allah. And I meet another Yid, an older Talmud Chacham. And I told him what I'm working on. He goes, I'm working on the same sefer, working on the same topic. I said, really? He tells me, you have any interesting shilas that came up? I said, yeah, very interesting shilah. The Rataz says that we shouldn't use a goy. What about a shinui? Can I use a shinui or not? He says, no, so what happens? I said, I sent the shilah in Rabbi Yashiv and he's masking. He says, no, a shinui you could use. He says, really? It's interesting. He goes, I sent my son to ask Rabbi Yashiv the same shilah. He says, we'll find out. The kitzah, he calls me back a few days later. He says, my son was by this thing. He asked one of the Talmidim. The Talmidim asked Rabbi Yashiv. And Rabbi Yashiv said that you should not use a shinui. He said, don't use a shinui either. So how could that be? I called back this Talmud Rabbi Yashiv. I said, what do you make a fool out of me? I said, 3 days apart. He says, can't be. He goes back to Rabbi Yashiv. He tells me it's fascinating. So what happened was, when he asked Rabbi Yashiv the Shaila, he said, a man from Lakewood, but the Tainen, got the shtickle Torah in the Taz. He says, someone from Lakewood had a shtickle Torah to say in the Taz that the Taz just means referring to akum. You shouldn't use an akum, but a shina you could use. He says, yes, ma you mask him. And he said, yeah. He smiled. He said, yeah. When he asked him, he said, Rabbi Yashiv says, mir gefragt, mir gesagt, das shtickle Torah. Warte, ich bin masken, das schöne shtickle Torah. Aber la halacha pasken mir nicht das so. He says, you had told me you have a shtickle Torah from Younger Man in Lakewood. I smiled. I said, yes. He said, the other person asked me, what's the halacha? Halacha, we don't use a shinui. So it comes out, according to this, but it comes out a big enough communal halacha. Do I use a shinui or not? So what's interesting is that we have mamish, a stira about this, a mefurish stira about whether or not we use a shinui or whether, this whole shiloh with the Taz. Do we use a goy? Do we use a shinui? Do we try to divert it? So it's mamish and before shastira. One should use a shinui. So let's get to that mishabura. Just my mishabura's on the other table. I'm just getting the mishabura. So the mishabura is fascinating because the mishabura in Shin Chav Ches, over there, he seems not to be, Shinui doesn't scare him so much, but Bachlal, let's go see what the Mishabura says. There's a few different Mishaburas which actually talk about this topic, and we'll see that the Mishabura himself, over here in Siman, in Sivkat Lamed Zayin, in Sivkat Lamed Hay first, he says, if a person could deliver care without it costing time, Says the chokama denuchal lasis beheter. However, you can do something beheter. Don't do it, iser. The nearer the huadin din ma'ideshinim is achar adavar ma'at. The same thing if through a shinoi it takes a little bit longer to do. Like they ain't a choili bahol, but it's not a panic situation. Nami misachar ma'at. They lasis ayidei shinoi. Better to do with a shinoi if it takes a little bit more time. Then it's a midrabbar. Okay, that's in the Shitas Harama. Now that he brings a Taz and he says you should not do it with a goy, a chlal. He says that a yid will be more will hasten more. Now he puts in a word like this, and this word he's getting from the Taz itself, as Rav Wolzner points out. He says, if the yesh afilu safek hatzala, if there might be a risk, the yesh sakana bebirur, and it's for sure is sakana kol hazar is harezim meshubach. To do it in the most expeditious way. Why does it have to be bebirur? We know for sakanas even when there's a suffix, even there's a suffix, we say that you should be machal Shabbos. So why does he say here only bebirur? Which is a fascinating. Which that lashon is, it doesn't seem to be accurate. Why should it be bebir? Let's say it's not bebir. Who cares? There's another mishabura. There's another mishabura in Siman Shin Lamed. So in Siman Shin Lamed, over there it's talking about where there's a chayla, and there's a chayla, and there's a question of making a fire for a chayla. So over there as well, the Mishnah Berurah says that if that for the full 30 days is a sakana for a woman to be cold. It says v'lachein im I efsher ayidei oivei galulim, if it's not possible to use a guy, oisin ayidei Yisrael, use a yid. Well, the shar chayla, if it's not a sakana ayidei oivei galulim mutter, then you could use a guy for sure. But wait a second, we're talking about a chayla sheish b'sakana. And we're going in the Shitas HaMachaber here. Machaber says we never use a guy. Why is the Mishnah Berurah saying if you don't have a guy, then a yid could start the fire? It's a chayla sheish b'sakana. So now, if it's a chayla sheish b'sakana, why? Now you could argue shloshim yom is not really a chayla sheish b'sakana, but this is a big shaila, because you're telling me that it's a sakana. That the gabi achaya, someone who gives birth within 30 days after having a baby, being cold is a risk to her life. So if you don't have a guy, use a yid. Why? Don't use a guy. We just said the machaber. The machaber says that you always use a guy. You don't use it. You always use a yid. You don't use a guy. A similar thing we find is we find this concept. And the Mishnah Berurah says this in multiple occasions, the same concept again and again. And where there's no icher, then we'll use a yid if there's no guy. Why? The we should not even ever have a minute to use a guy. So, based on this, wanted to suggest as follows. And again, this is Rav Wolzner, I think Rav Wolzner has a similar mahalach, which is as follows. The lashon of yesh sakana bibir, if there's a certain sakana, you could be machal, then you don't use a guy, you don't use a shinoi. Sakana bibir? Why sakana bibir? Even it's a suffix sakana. Which means like this: someone gets a bad cut. Someone gets a cut on the first day Yom Tov. He needs a tetanus shot. Now for tetanus, doesn't matter if he gets it in some cases it may, but most cases he gets it in 24 hours, according to some, I think even 48 hours, he's fine. So he has to go to the hospital. It's a 3-day Yom Tov. He needs to go to the hospital. Should a yid get in his car and drive? It's a sakana. So could be the Taz is saying that bebirur, you know for sure there's no sakana at all. It happens now. If you get to the hospital now, you get it in 5 hours, 10 hours, no problem. In that case, that's not when we said you're not allowed to use a guy. We're talking about where it's bebira. When someone's coming to light a fire for a chayla, doesn't matter if I light the fire with if there's someone, there's a yid and a guy, who lights the fire, the yid or the guy? Does it really matter? The chayla doesn't matter at all. So therefore, in that case, one could argue that the Taz never said that halacha. The Mishabrura, who paskins like the Taz, the Mechaber, who paskins like the Mechaber says don't use a guy. But here, Mishabur is saying, if you don't have a yid, then use a guy. Why? Don't use a guy at all. The teretz is that if I know for sure that it doesn't make a difference, that's why the Mishabur puts in a lashon bebirer. He puts in a lashon that if you know for certain that there's no sakana, then that's when you don't use it. When there's for certain is a sakana, then we don't use a guy. But if it's not certain, if certainly there's no sakana, it doesn't matter waiting. It could be in that case, you would be allowed to use a guy. So someone on Yom Tov that needs to go to the hospital for a tetanus shot, it's okay to use a guy. Because over there, you don't have the halacha of the Taz. The issur of using a guy is when there's bebir sakana. When there's bebir no sakana, it could be a bimutter. Even more than that. Let's say someone's feeding tube fell out. The doctor says, it was actually an actual story where the Tzalem members on the scene said, okay, we'll take you to the local hospital. And said, no, my doctor wants us to come back to the hospital. They got in touch with the doctor, and the doctor says, yeah. I wanted to come back to this specific hospital. And then he said, he basically threw out, he said, yeah, I'd like to see her. He says, okay, so we'll come now. I go, well, you don't have to come now. He says, I forgot where he was. He says, I believe I think he's even in the Hamptons. He says, I'm not going to be back for another few hours. Now, she needed to get transported with an ambulance. She could not be taken in a car. But the doctor is saying, bring her in. I'll be there in a few hours. It's bebir. There's no sakana. In that case, it could be a mechuyev at that point. Why? Because then we divert back to the Ramah. The Ramah says without ichor and dichoy, we use a guy. The Taz says, no, we never use a guy. But it could be. That's only a case where there's a sakana. But when there's bebir, no sakana in waiting, it could be that you'd be allowed to use. It could be you'd be allowed to use a guy, or you can make an argument you'd be mechuyev to use a guy in those extreme cases, a tetanus shot, things like that. Though that's where you could make that argument.
Is the Rav saying that when you can wait, it takes it out of the gather of sakana, or you have new gather a sakana, which one could wait, but he retains the halacha of sakana.
Exactly. Exactly. It has to be a cholish sakana. If you don't have a guy, if let's say someone is in the Catskills and he can't get a guy during COVID, there's no taxis, and his kid needs a tetanus shot, you're right, he can wait 24 hours. If there's no guy, you could go with a yid. It's a cholish sakana. But for a yid to get into a car and drive to a place to go get a tetanus shot, even though it's a sakana, that's not what the Ran is talking about. And even more. The Reb Shlomo Zalman says anything you're doing which is not patient care, directed to patient care. For example, a person that some members are turning on the air conditioning, not a cardiac patient, not febrile seizures, not like a case where it's just comfort. A case where he has to write down a telephone number just for whatever the purpose is. It's not patient care. It's not a panic situation. Shlomo says I should use a shinui over there. Why? He says because the l'chari have the same svar. First of all, so over there is even more. It's because it's not patient care. The heter of the isser of using shinuyim and goyim is not regarding patient care. So maybe you could argue that, okay, then I don't want to go that far. So there are times where I'd be able to use a shinui, even according to the poskim that are machmer. However, I'll just let you know that the Avnei Nezer, the Ktosha Shulchan, they say that the whole isser hataz, that you're not allowed to use a guy, is dafka guy. But the shinui, they said you would be allowed to use a shinui, but you should let people know that you should just let people know that that really it's mutter to do it and just inform them so we don't mislead them. So let's recap. Let's recap what we just went through. We have a mechaber. So we start off in the first part of the shir. We were juxtapositioning goy, shinui. Amir la'akum, shinui. Over there we said you can make made arguments either way. It could be better to use a amir la'akum, no maisa. Possibly better to use a shinui because it's a malacha gerua. Now let's go to shin chav ches. Over here, the same thing. The mechaber says you have a cholish yesh b'sakana. No, don't do anything. No goy, no shinui. Do it in the most expeditious manner. Says Rama, no. There's no pushing off. Do it with the shinoi. Do it with the guy. Says the Taz, no. He says that you ain't lasting from Eli the Akum the Yisrael's reason tvei, and he says sakana bebirer, then you don't use a guy. So we have a question. Number one is why do you use lashon sakana bebirer? There was no question. Number two in the Mishabura. In 3 places he seems to say that a yid could do it where there's no guy and where there's no guy. Why should I use a guy at all? If it's a chayil sheish b'sakana, we pass like and we're going to sheet zamachaber, we don't use a guy at all. The answer is it could be that that's only when there's a vadai sakana or a suffix sakana, which potentially could be time may be of essence, but where it's vadai no sakana, where vadai time does not make a difference, then for sure in those cases you should be allowed to use a guy. The Taz doesn't apply. The default mode would be the Ramah. It's potentially you could say that. However, legabe shinoi, here is a difference. Shinoi, when I'm dealing with not with patient care, or b'chlal, some want to suggest that a shinoi a yid is allowed to do. Why is he allowed to do a shinoi? Because it's still you doing it. The same way we wanted to say that a shinoi, it's better to do Amir La'akum than a shinoi. We said earlier because by shinoi, I'm doing a maisa. Amir Akum's lav shein by maisa is a shul shein by maisa. So the same thing over here. The point is we don't want you to give over your responsibilities to somebody else. And therefore the Taz is very busy. You can't use a guy. A yid is a zoriz. Next week they're going to get from and they're going to say you can't use a guy. You can't use a yid, you have to use a guy. But when a yid is doing the maisa himself with a shinoi, so it could be in that case you don't have the svara that next week they're going to say a yid can't do a malach. Of course you can do it. The yid's doing it, so use a shinoi. So it could be in this case it would be different. Now there are mashmois and poskim both ways. Anyone that wants to have fun with this, you could see there's many poskim that go both ways on in diukim and both ways on this topic. So ayotzim mikol anal, that really when there's a big difference between shinoi and amir lakim, no 2 derabbanans are created equal. Every derabbanan is different, but the characteristics in the situation may be different. So that's why you need it. So the paskin ishals is so difficult. On one hand, we saw in the first part of the Ran, it could be that there's milas of using a guy versus a shinoi. When it comes to refuah, it could be that a shinoi is that you could do things with a shinoi even though you can't do it with a guy, because you're not giving over your responsibility, not abdicating your responsibility to someone else. I'm doing it. I'm just doing it with a shinoi. Could be over there we didn't make that gzeira. The Taz was only talking about a guy, not about shinoi. If you look in the Lashon HaTaz, he's much more focused on akum, not shinoi. The Mishabur seems to say it's a little ichar, little dichoy. No. And then the final part, which we spoke about, is that it's possible in general that the whole issue of using a goy or a shinoi b'chlal is only said where it's potentially that there's lifetime may be of the essence. If time is for sure not of the essence, it could be it's mutter, and potentially you could argue you're mechuyev to use a goy in that case. I really want to thank everybody.
Before the Rav goes, 1 second. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this beforehand, so I apologize. But I know the Rav is writing a sefer on COVID shilas. Can you give us, before we close, a interesting COVID refuah shilah that came up in the last few months?
Oh, sure. So,
Hilchos refuah, obviously.
Legabe refuah. Let me just think something I was writing. Oh, so you had an interesting child like this.
Sorry, I didn't mention it beforehand. I apologize.
No problem. Pesach, the first day Pesach, I get a phone call from somebody who says they're coming out with it's convalescent this plasma treatment. We don't know, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? It's showing some promise. We know Lakewood got hit very hard with COVID. Now, if this works, it can really help hundreds and thousands of people. I'm not really sure yet if it works. So could we start a drive, go through Lakewood with loudspeakers? Anyone who had it should come. We're going to get tested for that. So now, there's a famous halacha that in order for something to be Machal Shabbos, has to be a refuah yedua. It has to be a refuah beduka, has to be a refuah yedua. Moshe, I got a call on Yom Tov, middle of the Seder. Somebody called me up that his neighbor told him that they have a cure for coronavirus. They heard about it from another lady in Brooklyn. You smear something on the hand and you get better. On the hand and the ankle and you get better. She wanted to know, could I help her get pulled to sneak it into a hospital on Mamish? It was like, but now all of a sudden, what makes something a refuah yedua? So now there's a question. They want to go get, they want to collect the plasma, start testing people to probably do plasma. Talking about millions of malachas deraisa. I mean, we're talking about turning this town upside down. Now, to save one yid, we would. But we know the halacha is there has to be a refuah yedua. What classifies something as a refuah yedua in today's day? The fact that the CDC can go back every single day, it is a refuah, not a refuah. What is it for us? What does halacha dictate something as a refuah yedua? That was one thing that's one thing that happened to be what I was proofreading this morning. So that's why I just picked that topic. But there's so many shalos which came up, end of life shalos that came up on Shabbos. People coming back from the hospital. We're talking about the Yusuvei Das. There were people who were mamish. We never had such things in our lives. Where people are in the hospital, we have no idea what's going on. And we couldn't get taxis. Yidden were driving on Shabbos. The Yusuvei Das was something we never did before. Yusuvei Das to calm a patient down. But in this case, it was real pekuach nefashis. So all these types of shalos came up. Could we had Yungalite had questions? Can I drive my wife to the hospital because she wants me to be there, but I know I have to turn around and drive back because they're not letting me in. So we also talk about Yusuvei Das, look at the Rabbanon. Now he's going to drive to the hospital and drive back. He's not allowed to go in. And they made it more allowances. Is that allowed on Shabbos for Yusuvei Das? How far do we take Yusuvei Das? I mean, really, so many of these shalos that came up. It was the scenarios were so different. But anytime there's